bonjour tout le monde. Sarah, if you're ever looking for a job, I think you did a fantastic job at presenting the work that we do. Thank you so much all for being here. You all came here for me. This is pretty nerve-wracking, but I'm very, very grateful that you made time in what I know is probably a really busy schedule to come here today and hear what I have to say, which is always a bit awkward for me because we're all about people learning from each other, and here I am, I'll be speaking by myself for 15 minutes, so that's a bit weird. We were trying to do brain days this morning, and logistically it couldn't happen, but maybe next Creative Morning, maybe there will be brain days, so that's what we hope for. So do you remember what life was before the environmental movement and recycling? Do you remember? It's a bit like, I don't know if you remember that scene in Mad Men where they go for a picnic and Don is there with Betty and they're having a picnic, and then when they leave they just shake their tablecloth and just like leave the garbage all over and just take off in their car. That maybe it's a bit exaggerated, that's what people said when that scene came out, but it's still something that we were not used to do, thinking about recycling our bottles and being mindful about our water usage. So there was a moment where that was not just common way of behaving. And I remember for myself, I was home alone. I was probably like 8 years old, watching the Club des 100 Watts. The Club of the 100 Watts. And I was eating Kraft dinner with canned shrimps, because that's what I was eating when my parents were not there. And then Marc-André Coallier was talking about there's a hole in the ozone layer. And I was like, damn, that sounds pretty bad. I feel that we should do something about that. And that's the moment for me where I clearly remember that the environment became my thing. It became a thing I should care about and worry about and act upon. And what I want to do today, and the reason why I wanted to be here this morning, is I believe that the time has come for education and learning to become a thing, to become our thing. We all know, and we hear it all the time, schools cannot keep up with the pace of innovation. We're training kids for jobs that don't yet exist, and all of these things, I think, are now kind of common knowledge. I think I don't need to convince you that there's a problem right now with the way that we're schooling our children and thinking about education in general. It's not scalable and it needs to change. So that's I think a given, and I will take for granted that everybody here pretty much agree or has heard of that idea. But what I want us to think about is what if it's not about changing the schooling system, but rather creating a new one where we all take the right to own our own learning, but also the responsibility to propel each other and to create context as leaders, as entrepreneurs, as parents, to create context in which all the people that are around us can fully flourish and become their greater selves. And then when you think about that, it's like, wow, Kristen, that sounds like a great idea. And then if I was just to maybe let you go at this point, maybe what you would think about and what you would do is just think about sitting people in rows of chairs and then, delivering content to them, pretty much just what I'm doing right now. But if we think that the education system as it is right now is flawed, it's because there might be another way of thinking about education and thinking about learning. Because I can guarantee you that geniuses don't learn in rows of chairs. They're not told what to learn. They're not told you're going to learn this because I told you so, and they don't think that collaboration is cheating. That's just a given. So in that sense, if I would like you to become guerrilla educators, I don't want you to go back to school and do a full training in education and everything. How can you root that idea that you can propel other people? You can propel yourself first, but also other people by creating the right context in which they can learn. So as Sarah very cleverly mentioned, oh yeah, that's the next slide. Yes. The dawn, the new day has come for education. So as Sarah very cleverly said, we have been working for now 6 years with brain dates in reinventing the way people learn and making it more collaborative, and also giving value to what people sometimes feel is knowledge that doesn't make any difference for anybody. And so we've learned in the last couple of years that there are 3 pillars that we can all remember and base our learning work upon that are fairly simple. And that's what I wanted to share with you this morning. So the first pillar and the first thing to remember when we think about learning and what is real, 3 pillars, and what is real meaningful learning, the first one is that it's self-directed. Learning is always self-directed. And what that means is that every single human being is sovereign over their own learning. And any parents here, is there any parents in this room? Any parents here will tell you that you cannot force a child to learn to walk. You cannot force a child to learn to speak. You cannot force a child to learn to go on the potty, which I have learned painfully in the last couple of weeks. So it's just a given that education is something that is being done to you, and learning is something that you do and only can you do to yourself. And in that sense, it means that we all have to take responsibility for what we want to learn, how we want to go about it, and how we will measure success. And that is true for adults, but it's also true for children. Hello. Did you really want to come here today? Is it self-directed? So the one question you can ask somebody or ask yourself when you think about self-directed learning is simply, what do you want to learn? What would make sense to you? What is vibrant to you right now? What is meaningful to you right now? What do you want to learn? So that's the first principle. The second principle is, you cannot really force somebody to walk. So the second principle is learning is experiential. And there's a quote from Clayton Christensen that I absolutely love that goes, if there's no question, the answer has nowhere to go. So if you don't have a challenge, if there's nothing that you really care about, if you're not stuck in a place where you need to grow in order to tackle the challenge that you're having. So basically the challenge serves as a bridge between you as a person who can tackle that challenge, and you who is a person who can tackle that challenge. So it serves as a bridge for learning and meaningful and rooted learning. So that's, and I think if anybody here, again, is a parent or an entrepreneur or anybody doing creative work, you know how incompetent we always feel, simply because we're always giving ourselves new challenges. So as long as you tackle one, you're already up to the next, learning something new and growing to be able to tackle that challenge that you just gave yourself. So if you want to be a guerrilla educator and you want to help somebody to root their learning in meaning, a simple way and a simple question to ask is simply, what is important right now for you? What are the challenges that you want to tackle? And even to place this person in a place of challenge, in a place of growth. For instance, if in your team, somebody wants to learn to do public speaking better, just look out for these opportunities where this person can be challenged and can feel that she can grow and rooted in a real experience that she has to tackle. The third one, and I wanted to say that learning a new language is a very obvious place where learning is extremely experiential. If anybody here, probably all of you learned another language, you know that you can learn all you want in books, but then when you arrive in Mexico, if you don't know what that means, you think it's weird. Actually, even if you know what it means, you think it's kind of weird also. So the third one, and it's the one that we really work a lot on E180, is that learning is collaborative. Now, it doesn't mean that you cannot be home alone and read a book. That's not what it means. But it means that other people's guidance in your learning path is absolutely crucial. And something that we see constantly in the work we do is that the biggest hurdle for that is that most of us here don't think that we have anything really of importance to share with the world. We don't really see, I know this thing and this thing, but everybody knows that it's very difficult, and it's the work the work we always have to do is to help people to kind of give birth to their own greatness. It's like you're more than what you think. And the reason why is oftentimes we don't see the impact we'll have on somebody else's life simply because we have a conversation with somebody and then off we go and we never see this person again, but we change their life and we don't know about it. So I will try and tell a story. That usually makes me cry, but I will really try and control myself a little bit, even though it's very attendrissant to see somebody crying in front of 200 people. But I have in my family my father-in-law. His name is Noel, and Noel was diagnosed with leukemia 4 years ago. And he thrived, he went in remission. He always was saying that he wouldn't be, the bad stats. There's always like the bad and the good. And he was like, well, I don't really care like how big the bad stat is. I will just be the small exception if need be. And actually it worked, he's in remission, he's doing fantastic. And he was going for his yearly follow-up at the hospital. And he was sitting in the waiting room and he met a young couple that had just gotten married. And, oh no, it's coming. I cannot watch my husband right now because, and the couple had just learned that the lady, so the wife had leukemia and the prognostic was really bad. And they were debating, should we go through the treatment, even if there's a slight chance of it working, but then going through the pain of cancer treatment, or should we just let it go and fully enjoy the last couple of months that we have together? So I think if anybody had something like that in your family, you know that feeling and that debate. So Noel, it's the name of my father-in-law, just shared his experience. He just shared what he's been through, his mindset, like his experience of going through the treatment and what it did to him, but also the experience of seeing his first grandson being born, become a grandparent. And so he left, and that's it. And he came back a year later for his yearly follow-up. And as he was walking down the corridor, somebody just heard kind of a crazy man shouting, saying, this man, he saved my wife's life. And he turned around and embraced this crazy young guy. And it was the young guy that he met a year ago. And after this conversation, they decided to go with the treatment, and she was in remission, and she was saved. So just to say that, it doesn't mean that each time you share knowledge, you'll save a life. but maybe you will, maybe you will. Maybe it won't be from the death and cancer, but it can be from being stuck somewhere where you don't want to be. And sometimes just that conversation you have with somebody is all you needed to be propelled and to be unstuck. So there's an example, and there's other examples that are not as dramatic, but we talked about C2 Montreal 3 years ago. There's a young lady that came to us, and she was looking at the Brain Date Lounge, and it was pretty vibrant, and she was like, what's happening here, and what are people doing? So people share knowledge, you can learn from each other. And she was like, great, so I can meet a mentor. And we're like, yeah, but you can also share your knowledge. And she was a young student at McGill, like 22 years old in marketing, when she was like, well, I do photo, and I know a bit about marketing. I took a class, but you're here with all the CMOs of the world. So you're like, maybe not. And then she was like, maybe I could offer to share my perspective as a millennial on your product or services. And I was like, that's a great offer. So she puts her offer in the knowledge marketplace. And what do we know this year at C2 Montreal? It was the offer that was the most booked, that was the most appreciated, and the most popular. So, and it was a young woman. It was not like the CMO of Coca-Cola. It was a young woman that was just authentic and just shared what she knew, and it really took off for her. And the reason why collaborative learning is so powerful, I think there's two main reasons. The first one is because it's iterative. Just take a bit of water. So it's iterative. So I have been a teacher, I'm an educator, and oftentimes if you've taught, most of us, the way we go about it is that you have a point A, you have a point Z, and your role is to take your students from point A to point Z. And everything in the middle, such as personal interests, are pretty much a distraction more than something fruitful to base, learning on. And just because the way the system is made is mostly how it happens. But when you have a conversation, and the reason why conversations are transformative is simply because you're in an iterative process where I share a bit of knowledge, you give me feedback, you give me a bit of knowledge, I adapt my content, we build on what you're saying. So basically what it becomes is this new thing, and we're talking about that with Sarah, it becomes this new thing that could only have been created if both of us were here today. There's nobody else that could have had that conversation, and what we've created together by this dialogue, this conversation, is something unique and absolutely beautiful. And I'm sure you've been through that where you're just like, I feel I know this person, I feel it's a brother or a sister. Like we're really so in line and in tune. It's because you're really kind of, how do you say that? Communion. There's really there a sense of being together and creating something new, and it's very powerful, and it's something we see constantly, and that's because of the iterative process of learning through a conversation. And the second one is that it's mutually beneficial. So it's not just me giving my knowledge, but in order to do that, I have to prepare and I have to make sense of my own knowledge and decide what do I know that is worth sharing with the world. And also just the fact that you have to kind of structure that knowledge. Already you're in a place of, I don't know if you've ever heard that, but to teach is to learn twice. So you're already in a place of, okay, I need to make sense of my own knowledge and structure it so it makes sense for somebody else. So just this mutually beneficial place of learning really from each other is extremely powerful. And a question you can ask when you talk about collaborative learning with somebody and you're thinking about propelling somebody else or yourself is really where are you stuck and who could you talk to overcome the challenge that you're facing, which we talked about before. So a simple question, and even for you here, who can I talk to propel myself, but also when you're in a conversation to recognize this place where you can contribute to somebody else's path. It is something very powerful, and it's just a mindset. It doesn't take technology. It's just really just a mindset. So that's it. And I think that something that I wanted to do today is, even though you didn't have to cope with craft dinner and canned shrimps, I hope that for you today, when you think about it, this will be the moment where you realize that you can reclaim your own learning, and you also have a responsibility to propel other people so that we all become the great human beings that we can be. And it's not about, as I said, fixing the educational system, but rather thinking about it as when the crisis happened in Argentina, where the currency collapsed and they basically reinvented an economy based on barter. For me, it's all about creating a new education economy where the currency is the knowledge that we have, and we can create these spaces for all of us to achieve what we're here to do. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your time.